Okay, hello everyone. So everyone, hopefully everyone's in and ready. We're going to make a start. So, welcome everyone. There's people from all over the world, which is incredible. I think the furthest is Christchurch, New Zealand, which is some going when we look at air tightness and ventilation, all the things that we're doing. Just how far around the world that we do stretch. So that's really really great to see, and thanks for coming along. So what I'll do first is share my screen, and we're going to whiz through the presentation. Which I've not put in full screen. There we go. So, Chris, just to check everything's okay, audio and visual. Yep. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is the introduction to the ATTMA Ventilation Commissioning Certification Scheme. A very catchy title, but we wanted to do everything we said in the title. We generally refer to it as the DVCCS, so you'll see that in the slide somewhere, all the way through. If anyone could come up with a snappier name, do let me know in the comments, and we'll consider adopting it. But for now, it says everything we need to know in the slide. So this hopefully will take around 15 minutes. There'll be time for questions at the end. So if you want to ask a question, Chris has already added in the chat. Just raise your hand. We've got all of the audio visual here. So we're actually live from the Building Performance Hub, as well as live online. So it's a completely hybrid event using all of our fancy technology. So quick introduction. Some of you may not know me. Some of you may be here for the first time. I'm Barry. I'm the Group Managing Director of the Building Compliance Testers Association. There's a lovely picture of me taken a few thousand feet in the air in some awful Ferris wheel. So that's me looking brave while I'm terrified of heights. My job is to look after a substantial amount of the business. So we have it's kind of 5 or 6 separate strands. ATTMA UK being the biggest. That's the Air Tightness Testing Measurement Association in the UK. That is the big company. SITMA is our sound insulation testing scheme. We're quite fortunate to have our UCAS accreditation, our final head office assessment in a few weeks. So thanks for bearing with us on that one, guys. With the Building Performance Hub, which we're standing in now, it's a 10,000 square foot warehouse. Inside, we've built an entire house. We built a sound insulation suite. We built a full ventilation suite. There are 19 different ventilation systems installed, and we provide our training for that, which we'll discuss in a little bit. We have ATTMA Australia and New Zealand, which I'll be heading out to New Zealand in a couple of weeks. So we'll get to hopefully see as many of you as we can. And we have this new thing that we started creating, which is the North American BCTA, which is effectively doing all the wonderful things we do here in the USA and Canada. So watch this space as these all of these businesses are booming, which is fantastic to see. Now, we're here today to talk about ventilation. The purpose of the ventilation scheme. Well, we all know about the ventilation industry. So I'm going to cover off what is good and what is not so good, and we can talk about how and why we feel we fit into this market. So the purpose, really, in simple terms, is to deliver a compliance testing industry scheme which publicly recognizes and promotes competent testers. It's the exact same line we use for all of our schemes, because it's really important that we're not just there to take a check. We're not just there to give you a certificate in exchange for money. We're actually work behind the scenes with all of our staff to push and promote all of the industries that we do and that we're involved in to make sure we get the very best. And that's evident in the fact that England is, if not the first country in the world to have 100% air tightness testing as of June 2022. And that's because we push from behind the scenes and make your jobs and your careers and your businesses boom as best we can. And ventilation is the next step towards that. We also, exactly as we say, we ensure ongoing compliance. So we're not just taking the paycheck, we're actually looking after you, but we're also auditing you. We're also checking that what we're doing is correct. And it's really important that we do that. This isn't, as I say, this isn't just something that's taking cash in exchange for certification. And DCS, well, we've been talking about it for a long time. We've been asked, probably when I first started and got involved with ATTMA in 2014, one of the first questions somebody asked me was, when are you going to get involved in ventilation? And we've always just shied away just a smidge because it's not our area of expertise, and there's already competent person schemes, there's already training. It just wasn't right for us to do at that stage. But as we've pushed and pushed, homes have become more and more airtight. And I've been getting phone calls from the national press that say airtight homes are killing people. That happens about once every 6 months. And I always say, no, underventilated homes are killing people. And that's because we're not checking what we're installing. We're just assuming. So we need to fix that. So we took a bit of inspiration actually from the Future Homes report from February at the beginning of this year, which you should definitely read. Go onto the Future Homes Hub website and you'll see it there. And it's a fantastic report about the industry and how we're going to improve through to 2025. There's a couple of paragraphs that I took from this, dropped into this presentation because I thought they were really very important. The first is that they say in this report, the existing competent person scheme training can be completed in only 2 days. However, there is minimal hands-on installation training and generally without commissioning, fault finding, diagnosis, assessment as part of the training. There are no ongoing checks of competency after training. It is recommended that the approach to ventilation as a service must be overhauled. So really strong words, and it made us think we can do better. The next line I took is, given that an installer is trained to install, commission and sign off their own works, responsibility for that performance is removed from the system designer. The work group proposed that installing and commissioning processes are separated, with the designer taking responsibility for the installed performance. Now, again, strong words, and we agree. It's time to make an improvement. The last slide, the figure 96 of that report, I thought was very powerful and definitely one to share with you, is that they actually split the process into 4 separate sections. And our chair said to me this morning, well, you could actually have a 5th. I thought let's currently we have 1, so let's not run before we can walk. We have section A, they say, is design. We have B, which is install, and C, which is commission. Commissioning is actually where we sit right now. This certification scheme that we're launching is about the commissioning. We're not the installers. We're not training for installation. We are simply looking only at the commissioning side of it, making sure that what works does work. And I know there will be questions about overheating and approved document O, and it is our plan to work our way back. So we're going to start at commissioning. We will do installation and we will do design and overheating assessments as part of that. Overheating and approved document O does come into the commissioning process, but not quite in the way. It really focuses heavily on design and making sure that your window's open and you have the correct purge ventilation and things. So we're not going to focus on that just yet. And given that we do have a sound insulation testing scheme and we also have a ventilation scheme, at some point it would be prudent not to combine the two and measure noise from ventilation. So do watch this space. This has the ability to really open ourselves up. So the aims of the ATTMA DVCCS, again, catchier names can go into the comments, is to provide scheme members and testers with an independent and impartial way of demonstrating professional competence, as well as meeting the government's regulatory compliance requirements. So testing, we know in England it's been mandatory since 2010, I believe. 13 years we've had of ventilation being measured, and we all know if you speak to anybody that does it, the fail rate is incredibly high, but the reaction and change and retrofit rate is incredibly low. These certificates get swallowed up and they disappear, and we're going to make sure that no longer happens. To give valuable recognition under the scheme's brand to use for their benefit in the market. Technical and non-technical support from our impartial staff that are employed by the scheme to manage what we do. It's really important. One of the successes of ATTMA has been our independence. We are truly the independent side of the business, and we really look after our members. None of us go out and do testing. None of us go out and do measurement. None of us go out and compete with anybody. We exist to make sure that the industry operates to its full potential. The ongoing promotion and marketing of the testing. specifically with its members, specifiers, stakeholders, and regulators. We're probably on a lot more committees in some very important places than we always talk about, and that's something we definitely need to improve on. But we're always working behind the scenes with local governments. We're always reviewing reports and documents that come in to make sure that the air tightness, acoustics, and now ventilation is always top of the agenda. And we also represent the membership through elected representation. So we have various committees that make sure what we're doing currently is working, what we're doing in the future is the right thing for us to be doing. So when we look at the challenges, we look at, well, I picked these ones out as the kind of headline figures. This is what's going wrong in the industry, and this is what this scheme really needs to try and put right. So first of all, not enough ventilation being measured. I mean, every ventilation system should be being measured in this country, and it's just not. We're not even close. So anecdotally, we're not even doing 5%. We're installing MVHR systems, and we're not measuring them at all. We're not commissioning them at all. It's just not something we're doing. We have conflicts of interest, as we've already discussed. We have a lack of understanding of free flow versus ducted flow. That needs a huge improvement. Assumptions that lots of noise equals lots of airflow. Again, not quite the case. We have a traceability and an accuracy issue. So if I flick through these, not enough ventilation being measured. We know change cannot happen without a fit for purpose certification scheme being in place. And that's what I am hanging my hat on, that this is a fit for purpose certification scheme to make sure that we are properly measuring ventilation that's being installed. We're going to push all of the industry to require third-party ventilation certifications. So by proving the system we have and showing how it can be done, we're expecting to be dropped into building regulations and certain building certification standards as the route to go to ensure that your third-party ventilation checks are being done and are being done appropriately. In terms of measuring or declaring by the installer, that can't happen. So you have to be independent of the installation. You cannot install and measure and sign it off as part of the ATTMA DVCCS. Again, answers on a postcard for a snappier name. The lack of understanding, well, all members are trained and we assess everybody biannually. So every 2 years, you've got to come back to one of the approved training partners. You'll be updated on any changes to the regulations, changes to equipment, changes to technique, and you'll be expected to be assessed again. Now, it's not something that's, you need to worry too much about. It's just showing people you know how to do your job, but we are now implementing that mechanism so that we are reassessing ourselves as an industry. We can't just sign people off and away, and 25 years later, they're still qualified. So we've got to have some sort of technique to continuously retrain people to make sure they're keeping themselves up to date. So as I said, we'll be teaching best practices alongside the assessments. We've got to start changing the mindset of people in the ventilation industry or people in the construction industry. I mean, people in the ventilation industry generally get it, but we need to remove assumptions that adequate ventilation is provided without measurement. We can no longer say, I've installed a fan and it's okay. Why is it okay? I've held a bit of toilet tissue up to the fan and it's definitely sucking some air. That's not acceptable. We need to do better as a construction industry. So we need to take actual measurements, provide actual data. In terms of traceability, we already operate our lodgement system. Our lodgement system is already worldwide. We're using it in 4 continents. If there was blower door testing in Antarctica, they'd be using the ATTMA lodgement system to record their air tightness tests. 1.3 million tests are now lodged in the ATTMA system. And what we've done is adapt and add ventilation to our current lodgement system. So we can now combine the two. We can start looking at real data of homes and their ventilation, or home air tightness results and ventilation results, and start providing that analysis to local government so that we can improve what we're doing. And we can also then cross-reference in years to come if homes do have problems, if there is mold growth, if there is issues with high CO2 levels. We can look back and say, how was that building designed? How was it measured? And what are the outcomes? Where did we get it right and where did we get it wrong? The only way we can do that is to collect this kind of data. And as I said earlier, remember there's no such thing as a property being too airtight, only underventilated. I could scream that till I'm blue in the face, and when I'm 6 feet under, that sentence is definitely going on my gravestone. I have screamed it until I'm blue in the face. There is no such thing as a home being too airtight, only underventilated. There's a little more for that in accordance with its airtightness and design, but you can't get too many letters these days. The accuracy is really important to us as well. So specific kit is required. Next to me with the guys in the room, we've got 2 different types of kit, and we actually restrict some of the measurement types we can do with certain kit because we need to accurately measure what we're doing. We can no longer just hold a vein anemometer up to an MVHR system and say, that's fine, it's about right. It's not good enough as the construction industry, and we need to play our part so everyone else can play their part. So we've removed the minimum benchmark method. That cannot be used in the ATTMA DVCCS, but we are training people to use the pressure drop curves correctly. So it is important that we lead by example here. So in terms of, I'll run through some scheme highlights because I think this is where most of the questions are going to be around. And you'll see that the green color we use here, you'll start to see more and more. That's our ventilation color that we're using as part of our marketing. So we actually have 2 parts of the scheme. This isn't just about going out and commissioning MVHR systems. This is about all ventilation strategies in the UK. So we have 2 parts. Part 1 is used to measure intermittent and decentralized fans. So if anybody is already out measuring fans, already owns a vein anemometer, you can go out and start commissioning ventilation systems within the ADVCCS. And those can be done on intermittent and decentralized domestic ventilation only. So if you have a vein anemometer and not a powered flow hood, you're restricted to intermittent fans and decentralized domestic ventilation. So there should be very little interruption as to what's already happening. If you want to balance centralized ventilation, you'll need to join part 2 of the scheme. So part 2 requires a powered flow hood in order to make those measurements. Otherwise, the measurements just are not accurate enough without appropriate power flow curves and quite complex calculations. So it's really important for us that we split those 2 up. Part 1 is still 50% of the construction industry. It's actually a little higher, about 55% of the construction industry are still installing intermittent fans, system 1, as we would all know it. So it's wrong for us to ignore that part of the market, but we've got to include part 2, which is the commissioning of MEV systems, which, as I say, around 45% of the market is made up of centralized MEV and DMVHR systems. So that's quite that's our two sections. We have 2 entry routes. Route 1 is training and assessment. So that's just like it would be for blower door testing, just like it would be for sound installation testing. You can come to any of the approved training partners that run the ventilation and have training and sit your assessments. Or if you already hold some qualifications such as BPEC or NIC, EIC, and you wish to move over to our scheme, you can just come directly and do the assessment. So for part 1, that's simply come and measure some intermittent fans that we have installed here and making sure you can do the power drop curve. So you're calculating the back pressure. And if you want to join part 2 of the scheme, we'll ask you to do that and commission an MVHR system that we have set up here with the appropriate flow rates. We've discussed briefly the equipment requirements, but it is important that we make it clear. If you have a powered flow hood, you can join parts 1 and 2. If you have a vein anemometer only, you can join part 1, which, as I say, is more than 50% of the market currently. Calibration must be undertaken by a UCAS accredited calibration laboratory, and it must be calibrated annually. That's no surprise. And we have the ATTMA lodgement process. So what I'm going to do is just show you where I truly believe the value comes in from this certification scheme. And special thanks to Simon for his hard work in making this happen, because the work that's gone in is unbelievable. So most of you guys will recognize the ATTMA lodgement system. and you'll start to see some changes. We're now going to be adding all of the schemes are going to be grouped into one big one big lodgement system. That should happen by the end of the year, and that's called Building Passport. So your air, your sound, your vent are all going to be included into projects. So you'll create a project each time you test, and a project will drop into and show you all of the different ways, all your different test results under one project. So what I'm just going to do is lodge a ventilation test quickly. So under ventilation, lodge test. If you've already done your air tightness test, you've already created yourself a project. So you can simply type the project ID. So I'm using 103 just because that's the test one, and it will show you all of the plots that that have been used. What I'm going to do is just create a new plot, and I'm just going to call this ADVCCS example. It's going to be system 4. We're going to make it 3 bedrooms, floor area of 140. And that's the minimum information I believe we need for this side of it. If you've already done the air test, it will pick out all of that data for you. So what we've got, it will automatically calculate the minimum rate based on the floor area. It will select the regulations automatically because it knows the address. And if you're in Scotland, it will do it automatically by volume rather than meters footprint, which the whole thing has been designed very, very cleverly. So what we'll do in this instance is we'll add the wet rooms first. So we'll add the bathroom. We're going to say that we have an ex-Belair, because they're not in the room, one of these, and we'll give it a quick serial number. You'll add your picture. So you've got to add a picture of your serial number of the kit and the installation to prove that you can have access to the filters. The position is on the ceiling, and this is an extract. Great. So let's pretend we've got 2 bathrooms. Let's say we have a utility room, and let's go one more. Let's say we have another wet room, kitchen. So we had our wet rooms, and then we can add our dry rooms. So we're going to have a bedroom. We know we've got 3 bedrooms. We've got to put the volumes in for the bedrooms, so it's evenly distributed. The first one we can make large, and these can be smaller, and then we'll add a living room. Let's say the living room is 55. And what you'll have noticed on the right-hand side is that all of the calculations for required flow rates are all done for you. Super simple. You don't need to calculate any of the stuff. You don't need to mess around with any of the requirements. It just tells you what you need to do. So you can set these jobs up before you even attend site. We can select add in notification text. We can choose the test date. We can I'll then add some numbers in here. So excuse me while I look down at my laptop. Let's just assume these are all passed. And let's do the supply. Bear with me. There we go. So the system will calculate the required rates. We haven't added our equipment, and it's showing there that the automatically will tell you if the boost isn't quite right. It will highlight that for you. So then you can save and submit, and it will calculate the full rates, and then you can download from the download your test certificate, just like you would your normal ATTMA lodgement certificate, and that's you able to submit the test. Let's pull open the certificate. They're doing that. There we go. So here's the certificate. You can see what that looks like. You'll see the lovely green color and all of the information on. For those of you eagle-eyed, you may have already noticed the DV, domestic ventilation tick in the certificates that appeared some time ago. And what it will show in this case, it's actually failed because the high rate met the requirements that it's meant to. And the same quality control applies. So you'll have your QR code as required to ensure you can check any certificate just by scanning it with your phone, or if you're in a computer, you can tap, or you can actually copy the code at the bottom and head to the ATTMA website and check that the data is correct. Okay, let me get my presentation back. So the question we all want to know, how much is this going to cost me? Well, I think it's actually quite reasonable. For the assessments, if you're just doing the part 1 assessment, it's £100 plus VAT. For part 2, it's £150 plus VAT. And your scheme fees, £250 plus VAT per year. And that's based on a personal basis. So that's not a company basis. That is each individual registered measurer. And lodgement will be exactly the same and will follow the air tightness lodgement rate at £1.75 plus VAT. The annual fees will apply from July to June each year, so they're separated out from the air tightness fees, so you don't get a big whack all in January with all of the certification. So they'll drop in slightly later in the year, but operate on the same pro rata basis. So in summary, the ATTMA DVCCS, third-party independent check-in of correct ventilation airflow. Certification scheme that will proactively aim to ensure all ventilation systems are measured, not assumed or fraudulently signed off, and I don't use that word lightly. A lodgement system that reduces admin, increases accuracy and traceability, and does calculations on the fly. Multiple levels, so that testers measuring system 1, as I still call it, are still recognised, and a network of improved training partners to deliver training and assessments that are currently being built up and down the country. So this is not just an us thing. This is a nationwide thing, so we can get people training dropped into the certification scheme, and we can build a new army of ventilation measurers, so that we can start to make a good difference in the industry. And with that, I invite some questions if there is any. Okay. Just check the chat just now. Nigel, are those presentation slides going to be available later? Yes, I believe we also recorded the presentation, so Chris will clip it up and get that out. There will be a recap of the presentation available later. Would labs need to be UCAS accredited for carrying out these tests? The labs, the laboratories, no, there's no UCAS required. That's not written into any of the approved documents. This certification scheme would deem you competent to carry out those airflow measurements, those ventilation measurements. I hope that's. Is there an other option for regulations? I'm not entirely sure what that means, Nigel, but I'm happy to have a discussion with you after the event if we can rephrase your question. So hopefully that summarizes anything. Is there any questions in the room? I can repeat that for the people that are online. Is there any way of enforcing this so it doesn't get signed off by a non-third-party certified person? The answer is it's written into the building regulations already that it has to be done. It's just not being enforced. And my opinion of this has been a bit chicken and egg. It's very hard for local governments or LABC or approved inspectors to insist that this is signed off when there isn't really a fit for purpose scheme for doing so. So us creating the scheme allows that funnel of requirements or funnel of inquiries to go into the certification scheme, so they can so local governments, approved inspectors, and local authority building control will be able to say it needs to be done by these people. So yes, in answer to your question, it's already there, but hopefully we've opened a route of discussion to make that happen. I've got on here, lodgement form has a regulations box which you show the UK area schemes. Is there other? Yes, so if you want to join from Australia and New Zealand, we can absolutely make that happen. This scheme, as it currently stands, has been very much written around the UK building regulations for each individual territory. But I'm more than happy if it's for Australia and New Zealand. We just need to know what the requirements roughly are, or whether you will follow. For us to update and change which regulations are selected, it's actually very simple for us to do. We can do that very quickly. But it's just the value, the requirement values have been written around UK regs. So if the guys in Australia and New Zealand want to just follow what's written in our regs, or they happen to be the same, it's something that can happen within minutes. If we need to change those numbers behind the scenes, it's something that can happen in a few hours. But as it currently stands, the scheme is written around the UK building regulations. Diane asks, have Scottish building regs brought into this, and are they happy to enforce it? Without wanting to call them out, I'm led to believe there is somebody from Scottish Building Standards on the call, so there's no requirement for them to speak, but I think they're keen to listen to what we have to say, and they're keen that there's a route open to change and to support them. We're there to absolutely support them. So fingers crossed that the Scottish Building Standards are listening, and they see this as the right way to go. Jake asks, on the name front, how does Scheme for Domestic Ventilation Certification sound? Oh, it's actually not a bad one. It's one less letter, which might make it a smidge easier. Thanks, Jake. And I think for now, that's probably it. So I'll close up. You guys all have my email address. You all have my contact details. You all have my LinkedIn, and you can head to the website at any point and contact any of us. With that, I'll close off. And if there's any further questions, you know where to contact me. So thank you very much.